Earth's expansion into space had been steady but cautious. After nearly a century of establishing outposts and military forces across the solar system, humanity had secured its place among the stars. The United Earth Defense Force maintained several training stations throughout the system, each with its own specialty and reputation. None, however, was quite as notorious as Lambda 12. Stationed in the outer reaches of Saturn's orbit, Lambda 12 was where military careers went to die. It was the dumping ground for problem soldiers, failed cadets, and officers who had fallen from grace. The equipment was outdated, the facilities were in constant disrepair, and the personnel were a mismatched collection of the UEDF's least promising members. Clyde Morgan knew this all too well. His bunk in the station's East Wing had become his home for the past 8 months, ever since he'd managed to fail the Advanced Combat Simulation test for the third consecutive time. The record for most failures, they told him. A distinction he never wanted. "Morgan, get your ass out of bed." The voice of Sergeant Quinn echoed through the barracks, followed by the harsh sound of a metal batten against the side of his bunk. Command transmission coming in. All personnel required in the briefing room. Clyde groaned as he pulled himself upright. "What time is it?" "Time for you to move, soldier," Quinn barked, already moving to the next bunk. System-wide broadcast. Sounds important. The briefing room of Lambda 12 was hardly impressive. A converted storage bay with mismatched chairs and a projection system that flickered every few minutes. As the station's personnel filtered in, the atmosphere grew thick with curiosity and apprehension. System-wide broadcasts were rare, usually reserved for declarations of war or major political shifts. General Ragnall's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. The commanding officer of the UEDF looked like he hadn't slept in days. "This message is being transmitted to all UEDF stations and Earth government outposts," the general began. 12 hours ago, we received a transmission from the Zarkuan Collective, an advanced alien civilization from the Proxima Centauri system. Murmurs rippled through the room. First contact had been theorized but never confirmed, until now. "The Zarkuan have issued what can only be described as a challenge," Ragnall continued. "They have proposed a ritualistic combat between our species, a mechanized duel between champions. One pilot from Earth versus one from their collective." The general's face hardened. According to their message, this is how the Zarkuan traditionally determined the hierarchy between civilizations. "The stakes are high. If we win, they will recognize Earth as an equal power and establish peaceful relations. If we lose," he paused, "they have made it clear that they will consider humanity a subordinate species." The room erupted into concerned chatter until Quinn bellowed for silence. "We're assembling our best pilots for evaluation," Ragnall continued. "The duel will take place on a neutral station in 2 weeks. That is all for now. Updates will follow as the situation develops." The screen went dark, leaving the personnel of Lambda 12 in stunned silence. "Well," said Quinn, breaking the quiet, "good thing they won't be looking for candidates here." Laughter rippled through the room, and Clyde joined in despite himself. It was true. Lambda 12 housed the worst pilots in the system, and he was the worst of the worst. The days that followed were filled with speculation and rumors. Reports filtered into the UEDF was running trials to select Earth champion. The best pilots from across the system were being gathered at Central Command on Mars. 5 days after the announcement, chaos struck. The Lambda 12 communications officer burst into the mess hall during dinner. "They've all fallen ill," he shouted, waving a data pad. "All 20 finalist pilots at Central Command. They're all down with some kind of severe food poisoning or viral infection." Quinn grabbed the pad, scanning it quickly. "This has to be sabotage," he muttered. "But who would benefit from making Earth lose this duel?" The station commander, a tired-looking woman named Captain Hayes, walked into the mess hall an hour later. Her face was ashen. "I've just received the most absurd orders of my career," she announced. "Central Command is desperate. With all the qualified pilots incapacitated, they're running an emergency protocol. Every station in the system is to submit their lowest-ranked pilot for consideration. The room fell silent. That's right, Hayes continued. They're looking at the bottom of the barrel now. Each station will test their worst pilot in a simulation, and the results will be compared. May whatever gods you believe in help us all. All eyes slowly turned toward Clyde Morgan. No, he said, standing up from his seat. No way. I'm not. Even a real pilot. I failed qualifications 3 times. Exactly, Quinn said grimly. That makes you our official worst, Morgan. Congratulations. You're Lambda 12 candidate for the most important combat mission in human history. The following morning, Clyde found himself standing before the station's ancient simulation chamber. It was a relic from 2 generations prior, with wiring exposed in places and control panels that sometimes needed a firm smack to function properly. This is insane, he muttered as Quinn hooked him up to the neural interface. I can't do this. Just try not to embarrass us too badly, Quinn replied, though there was less bite in his voice than usual. The bar is already on the ground, Morgan. You literally can't do worse than expected. The simulation began, and Clyde felt the familiar disorientation as his consciousness merged with the virtual mech. He'd failed this exact scenario multiple times before, a combat sequence involving navigating a volatile asteroid field while engaging enemy units. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Clyde didn't immediately crash. His movements were erratic, unconventional, but he managed to destroy 2 enemy units before finally taking a critical hit 12 minutes in. When he emerged from the simulation, the control room was silent. 12 minutes and 14 seconds, said Ben Sasha, the young engineer who maintained the simulation equipment. That's actually your personal best, Morgan. Quinn was staring at a new message on his tablet. It doesn't matter, he said quietly. Central Command just sent their decision. They're going with Morgan. What? Clyde and Sasha exclaimed simultaneously. Every other station's worst pilot either refused outright or performed worse than you, Quinn explained, looking as though he could hardly believe it himself. Plus, something about your unconventional approach apparently caught the eye of one of the analysts. Captain Hayes walked in, her expression a mix of resignation and disbelief. Morgan, pack your things. A transport will arrive in 6 hours to take you to Mars for preliminary training. You're Earth's champion now. As the news spread through Lambda 12, Clyde became the subject of both mockery and a strange sort of reverence. Some laughed at the absurdity of sending the worst pilot in the system to represent humanity. Others clapped him on the back, as if merely being selected was somehow an achievement. Clyde spent his final hours at the station in a daze, unable to process what was happening. As he prepared to board the transport, Quinn approached him. Morgan, the sergeant said, I never thought I'd say this, but good luck. Clyde nodded, his throat too tight to respond. And one more thing, Quinn added, I'm coming with you. Someone needs to make sure you don't make a complete fool of yourself. For the first time since the announcement, Clyde felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe he wouldn't have to face this madness entirely alone. The military transport ship hummed steadily as it carried Clyde, Quinn, and to their surprise, Ben Sasha toward Mars. The young engineer had volunteered her services, arguing that someone familiar with older mech systems would be essential. They'll probably give you some ancient model that no one else wants to pilot, she explained. Might as well have someone who can keep it running. Central Command on Mars was a stark contrast to Lambda 12. Modern, spotless, and buzzing with activity, it was the heart of Earth's military operations. Clyde felt painfully out of place as they were escorted through the gleaming corridors to the mech bay. General Ragnall was waiting for them, along with a team of serious-looking officers and technicians. His expression darkened when he saw Clyde. This is our champion? He asked, making no effort to hide his disappointment. Pilot Clyde Morgan of Lambda 12, sir, Quinn confirmed, standing at attention. Ragnall sighed deeply. Show him the mech. They were led to a separate hangar where, sitting in isolated glory, was the most pitiful excuse for a combat mech Clyde had ever seen. It was an older model, clearly pieced together from spare parts, with mismatched armor plating and an asymmetrical design that suggested multiple modifications over the years. We call it Rust Bucket, one of the technicians said. It's a Mark IV Defender, but there's not much original equipment left. We've had to improvise with what we have available. Clyde approached the machine, running his hand along its worn exterior. This is what I'm supposed to pilot against an advanced alien species. It's what we have, Ragnall said flatly. Our newer models were compromised during the sabotage. This was in storage, immune to whatever affected our systems. It looks like a scrap heap, Quinn muttered. Sasha was already circling the mech, examining its components with a professional eye. It's not as bad as it looks, she said. The core systems are solid, even if they're outdated. With some tweaking, we might be able to get decent performance out of it. You have 10 days, Ragnall told them. Make it combat ready. And Morgan, try not to embarrass humanity too badly. With those encouraging words, the general left them to their task. The training facility they were assigned to was isolated from the main complex. A small hangar with basic simulation equipment and a cramped living quarters attached. Clyde suspected it was to keep him away from the real soldiers, to minimize the embarrassment of having Earth's fate rest in the hands of a failed pilot. Days blurred together as Clyde spent hour after grueling hour in the simulator, trying to master the quirks and limitations of Rust Bucket. Quinn pushed him relentlessly, barking orders and criticisms with military precision. Your reaction time is still too slow, Quinn shouted as Clyde failed another combat sequence. You need to anticipate the enemy's movements, not just respond to them. I'm trying. Clyde snapped back, pulling off the neural interface helmet. But this thing handles like a drunk elephant. The targeting system lags, the thrusters are unbalanced, and half the time the right arm freezes up entirely. Sasha worked tirelessly on the mech itself, rewiring systems and replacing components when possible. I think I've got the targeting lag down to 0.3 seconds, she reported one evening. It's not ideal, but it's better than before. It's still not enough, Quinn said grimly. The Zarkuan will have technology far beyond ours. We need an edge, something unexpected. As the days passed, Clyde began to notice something strange. During his simulations, he would occasionally succeed in maneuvers that should have been impossible with Rust Bucket's limitations. It was as if, for brief moments, he could feel the machine responding to his intentions before he even executed the commands. There's something weird about this mech, he told Sasha after a particularly successful run. Sometimes it feels like it's anticipating what I want it to do. Sasha frowned, pulling up diagnostic data on her tablet. That shouldn't be possible with this interface. The neural connection is basic at best. She disappeared beneath the mech's open chassis, emerging hours later with oil streaked across her face. I found something, she said excitedly. There's a secondary system wired into the neural interface. It's ancient tech, but it's creating a feedback loop that might be enhancing your connection. Can you make it stronger? Quinn asked, suddenly interested. Maybe, Sasha said, but it's not stable. Pushing it too hard could fry both the system and Clyde's brain. Do it anyway, Clyde said, surprising himself. It's our only chance. On the final day before departure, Clyde achieved his best simulation score yet. It was still far below what any qualified pilot could manage, but it represented remarkable progress. You might not entirely embarrass us, Quinn admitted, which from him was high praise indeed. That night, as they prepared for transport to the neutral station where the duel would take place, Clyde couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw visions of himself failing, of letting down not just his team, but all of humanity. He was startled by a knock on his door. It was Quinn, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of something amber. Technically against regulations, the sergeant said, pouring them each a generous measure. But I figured you could use it. They drank in silence for a moment before Quinn spoke again. You know, I've never told anyone why I ended up at Lambda 12. Clyde raised an eyebrow. Everyone assumed Quinn had angered someone important to get assigned to the military's garbage dump. I was a good pilot once, Quinn continued. Decorated even. But during a routine patrol near Neptune, my squadron encountered something unusual. Not Zarkuan, something else. I was the only one who made it back. He took another drink. Command didn't believe my report, so I must have panicked, made mistakes that got my team killed. They buried the incident and shipped me off to Lambda 12. What did you see out there? Clyde asked quietly. Quinn shook his head. The point is, sometimes being the worst, being at the bottom, it gives you a perspective others don't have. You see things differently. That might be your advantage tomorrow. With that cryptic encouragement, Quinn left Clyde alone with his thoughts and the remaining whiskey. Morning came too quickly. The transport ship that would take them to the neutral station was sleek and diplomatic rather than military. A gesture of peace, supposedly. Rust Bucket was loaded into the cargo hold, looking even more pathetic next to the polished interior of the diplomatic vessel. The journey would take 6 hours. Clyde spent most of it reviewing combat strategies with Quinn and making last-minute adjustments with Sasha. None of them mentioned the growing knot of dread that seemed to fill the ship. As they approached the neutral station, they got their first glimpse of Zarkoan technology. The station itself was a massive structure of flowing, organic-looking metal, with spiraling towers and curved surfaces that seemed to defy conventional engineering. It's beautiful, Sasha whispered, pressed against a viewport. Several Zarkoan ships hovered nearby, elegant vessels with the same flowing design as the station. They made Earth's most advanced ships look crude by comparison. The diplomatic team leading their mission, a stern woman named Ambassador Chun and 2 assistants, provided last-minute briefings on Zarkoan customs and protocol. Remember, Chun told Clyde, this is as much a cultural exchange as it is a contest. Your behavior reflects on all of humanity. Docking with the station was a tense affair, with the Earth ship seeming clumsy next to the graceful Zarkoan vessels. As the airlock cycled, Clyde took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The Zarkoan delegation waiting to greet them was unlike anything Clyde had imagined. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with slender bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with their movements. Their faces were vaguely reptilian, with large, multifaceted eyes that reminded Clyde of insect eyes, capable of seeing in multiple directions at once. Ambassador Chun stepped forward, performing a complex gesture that had been included in their briefing materials. We come in peace and honor, she said formally. The lead Zarkoan, distinguished by elaborate markings on its scales, responded with a similar gesture. When it spoke, its voice was surprisingly melodic, though the words were unintelligible until translated by one of Chen's assistants. I am Ottercall, Grand Adjudicator of the Zarkoan Collective, the alien said. We welcome Earth Champion to the Trial of Ascendance. All eyes turned to Clyde, who stepped forward awkwardly. He attempted the greeting gesture, but fumbled it badly. A ripple passed through the Zarkoan delegation. Their version of laughter, Clyde realized with embarrassment. This is your champion? Ottercall asked, the translator unable to fully mask the incredulity in the alien's voice. This is Pilot Clyde Morgan, Chun confirmed, her professional demeanor never faltering. Another Zarkoan stepped forward, slightly shorter but with more elaborate scale patterns and a bearing that suggested military training. I am Thale Ray, champion of the Zarkoan, it announced. I look forward to our contest. Clyde nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Thale Ray's posture radiated confidence and skill, everything Clyde lacked. They were escorted through the station to their quarters. The architecture was disorienting, with curved corridors and gravity that seemed to shift subtly as they walked. The Zarkoan technology was integrated seamlessly into the structure, with surfaces that responded to touch and atmospheric conditions that adjusted automatically for human comfort. Prepare your machine and your mind, Ottercall told them before departing. The first trial begins in 6 Earth hours. Once alone, Quinn turned to Clyde. Well, they certainly look advanced. They're going to destroy me, Clyde said flatly. Probably, Quinn agreed. But make them work for it. The arena where the duel would take place was a massive spherical chamber at the heart of the station. Viewing galleries ringed the upper levels, already filling with Zarkoan observers. A small section had been designated for the Earth delegation. Clyde sat in Rust Bucket's cockpit, running through pre-combat checks with Sasha's guidance over the comm. Neural interface is stable, she reported. That enhancement we discussed is online, but be careful. I'm seeing some unusual patterns in the feedback loop. Understood, Clyde replied, his mouth dry. Through the mech's view screen, He could see the arena being transformed. Holographic projectors activated, creating a realistic simulation of a volcanic landscape, complete with flowing lava and unstable terrain. Across the arena, a sleek, silver mech emerged, the Titan of Zarkoen. It was everything Rust Bucket wasn't. Elegant, balanced, clearly designed with advanced technology and a unified vision. It moved with fluid grace as it took position. The first trial simulates the fire plains of Zarkoen Prime. Ottercall's voice announced over the communication system. Combat will continue until one champion is disabled or yields. Begin when ready. Clyde took a deep breath and activated Rust Bucket's movement systems. The mech lurched forward, already feeling unbalanced on the simulated volcanic terrain. Thailray wasted no time. The Titan sprang forward with impossible speed, covering half the arena before Clyde could properly react. A glowing energy blade extended from the Titan's right arm, slashing toward Rust Bucket's midsection. Clyde managed to activate the shield just in time, but the force of the blow still sent his mech staggering backward. Warning lights flashed across his console. The shield generators were already at 60% capacity after just one hit. "He's too fast," Clyde shouted into his comm. "Use the terrain," Quinn's voice came back. "You've got nothing to lose. Take risks." Desperately, Clyde maneuvered Rust Bucket toward a region of unstable ground near a lava flow. The Titan followed, its movements precise and predatory. What happened next surprised everyone, including Clyde. As Thailray launched another attack, Clyde felt that strange connection with Rust Bucket intensify. Without conscious thought, he executed a maneuver that should have been impossible with his mech's limitations. A spinning dodge that caused the Titan's blade to miss by inches. In a moment of surprise that followed, Clyde activated Rust Bucket's crude, shoulder-mounted cannon and fired directly at the ground beneath the Titan. The unstable volcanic surface collapsed, momentarily trapping one of the Zarkoen mech's legs in cooling lava. Seizing the advantage, Clyde charged forward, landing a solid blow with Rust Bucket's reinforced fist against the Titan's torso. The impact reverberated through his own mech, but he saw a satisfying dent appear in the Titan's perfect exterior. The advantage was brief. With a surge of power, Thailray freed his mech and countered with a devastating combination of attacks. Energy blades sliced through Rust Bucket's outer armor, and precision energy bolts targeted weak points in the joints. Within minutes, Rust Bucket was badly damaged. Multiple systems were failing, and Clyde could barely keep the mech upright. With a final, powerful blow, Thailray sent Rust Bucket crashing to the ground. The first trial is concluded, Ottercall announced. Victory to champion Thailray. As Clyde was extracted from Rust Bucket's cockpit, he expected to see disappointment on the faces of his team. Instead, Quinn looked thoughtful and Sasha was grinning. "You landed a hit," she said excitedly. "No one expected that." "I still lost," Clyde pointed out, wincing as a medic treated a cut on his forehead where he'd struck the control panel. "Yes, but you lost better than expected," Quinn said. "And that move you pulled, how did you manage that with Rust Bucket specifications?" Clyde shook his head. "I don't know. It was like the mech knew what I wanted before I did." Sasha's eyes widened. "The neural enhancement. It's working better than I thought." The Earth delegation was subdued as they returned to their quarters. Ambassador Chun informed them that the second trial would take place the following day, giving them time to repair Rust Bucket as best they could. "The Zarkoen seem surprised by your performance," she told Clyde. "Not impressed, exactly, but interested. That's something." Sasha spent the night working on Rust Bucket, attempting to repair the worst of the damage with their limited resources. "I've got basic mobility restored," she reported in the early hours of the morning, "and I've tweaked the neural interface further. The connection should be even stronger now." "Is that safe?" Quinn asked. Sasha shrugged. "Probably not, but neither is losing this duel." The second trial was set in a simulated zero-gravity environment, with asteroid-like structures scattered throughout the arena to provide cover and maneuvering points. This time, Clyde felt more prepared as he settled into Rust Bucket's cockpit. The neural interface hummed to life, and he immediately felt that strange connection strengthening. Remember, in Zero-G, conventional tactics don't apply, Quinn advised over the comm. Use the three-dimensional space. Don't think like a ground fighter. Beginning second trial, Ottercall announced. The Void of Zalta. Thailray's Titan launched immediately, using precision thrusters to navigate the Zero-G environment with expert control. Rustbucket, by contrast, moved awkwardly, its unbalanced thrusters making smooth navigation difficult. Clyde tried to implement Quinn's advice, thinking in 3 dimensions rather than 2. He used the asteroids for cover, playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the more powerful Titan. As the battle progressed, Clyde began to feel more confident. The enhanced neural connection allowed him to compensate for Rustbucket's limitations, predicting trajectories and reacting with surprising speed. He managed to land several minor hits on the Titan, using guerrilla tactics rather than direct confrontation. Then something strange happened. In the middle of a complex evasive maneuver, Rustbucket suddenly lost power. All systems went dark for a brief, terrifying moment. "Sasha," Clyde called out. "What's happening?" "Something's interfering with our systems," she replied, her voice tense. "It's not damage. It looks like an external signal." Before Clyde could respond, he noticed something equally concerning. The Titan was experiencing similar difficulties. Its movements became erratic, its weapons systems firing randomly. Through the comm channel, Clyde heard Thailray speaking rapidly in the Zarkuan language, clearly alarmed. "Their mech is also affected," Quinn observed. "This isn't part of the trial." Rustbucket systems suddenly came back online, but they weren't responding correctly to Clyde's commands. The weapons system activated on its own, targeting not just the Titan, but the arena's structural supports. "I can't control it," Clyde shouted. Across the arena, the Titan was experiencing similar issues. Its powerful weapons were firing wildly, some shots coming dangerously close to the viewing galleries. Acting on instinct, Clyde opened a direct communication channel to Thailray. "Your mech is compromised too," he said urgently. "Someone's hacking both our systems." There was a pause before the Zarkuan responded. "Impossible. Our technology cannot be accessed by outsiders." "Well, someone's doing the impossible," Clyde replied. "We need to shut down before someone gets hurt." For a tense moment, Thailray seemed to consider. Then, to Clyde's relief, the Titan powered down its weapon systems. Following suit, Clyde initiated Rustbucket's emergency shutdown sequence, cutting power to everything except life support and basic communication. The arena fell silent as both mechs drifted powerless among the simulated asteroids. "What is the meaning of this?" Ottercall demanded over the comm. "Our systems were compromised," Clyde explained. "Both of our mechs. Someone was trying to take control." A flurry of activity erupted in the Zarkuan section of the viewing gallery. After several minutes of apparent debate, Ottercall spoke again. "The second trial is suspended. Security protocols have detected unauthorized access attempts to station systems. We will investigate before proceeding." As recovery drones guided both mechs back to their respective bays, Clyde couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger than a simple duel was at stake. Once back in the Earth delegation section, Quinn pulled Clyde and Sasha into a quiet corner. "This confirms my suspicions," he said in a low voice. "The same thing that happened to our top pilots. It wasn't random. Someone wants this duel to go badly." "But who?" Sasha asked. "And why?" "I don't know yet," Quinn admitted. "But if they're willing to risk interfering during the trial itself, they're desperate, and that makes them dangerous." Ambassador Chin approached them, her expression grave. "The Zarkuan are disturbed by what happened. They're conducting a full security sweep of the station. The final trial has been postponed until tomorrow. That gives us time to prepare Rustbucket," Sasha said. "And to figure out who's trying to sabotage us," Quinn added. That evening, as Sasha worked on securing Rustbucket's systems against further interference, Clyde found himself summoned to an unexpected meeting. A Zarkuan escort led him to a small chamber where, to his surprise, Thailray was waiting. The alien champion regarded Clyde with those multifaceted eyes. Without the translator present, they couldn't communicate verbally, but Thalray gestured to a holographic display showing both their mechs during the interrupted trial. The alien pointed to the moment when Clyde had warned them about the hack, then placed a hand on its chest in what Clyde interpreted as a gesture of gratitude. "I just did what anyone would do," Clyde said, knowing his words weren't understood, but hoping his tone conveyed the meaning. Thalray activated another hologram, this one showing the final trial arena. It would simulate an urban environment, with buildings and structures providing complex terrain. The Zarkuan champion made a series of gestures that Clyde eventually understood as a warning. Be prepared for anything. When Clyde returned to the Earth quarters, he found Quinn and Sasha deep in conversation with a technician from the diplomatic team. "We've identified the source of the hack," the technician was saying. "It originated from within the station itself, but it's using a sophisticated relay system to mask its true location." "Can you block it?" Quinn asked. "Partially," the technician replied. "But whoever's doing this knows both our systems and Zarkuan technology. They're good." Sasha looked up as Clyde entered. "We've modified Rustbucket's core systems," she said. "Added some old-school manual overrides that can't be accessed remotely. If the hack happens again, you'll have to pilot the old-fashioned way. Direct control, no neural interface." "That's going to put me at an even bigger disadvantage," Clyde pointed out. "Better than having your mech used as a weapon against civilians," Quinn countered. The night passed quickly, with last-minute preparations and strategy. Discussions. By the time Clyde climbed into Rustbucket's cockpit for the final trial, he was exhausted but strangely calm. Whatever happened now, he had already exceeded everyone's expectations, including his own. The simulated urban environment materialized around him, towering structures mimicking buildings, complete with multiple levels, bridges, and narrow passages. It was perfect for ambush tactics and close-quarters combat. "This is it," Quinn's voice came over the comm. "Remember everything we've worked on. And Morgan, no matter what happens, you've done well." Coming from Quinn, the praise was so unexpected that Clyde almost missed Ottercall's commencement of the final trial. The Titan emerged from behind an artificial building, moving with predatory grace. Thalray had clearly adjusted his tactics for the urban environment, keeping to cover and approaching cautiously. Clyde decided to take the initiative, pushing Rustbucket forward in a surprisingly aggressive opening move. The enhanced neural interface was working better than ever, allowing him to execute complex maneuvers despite his mech's limitations. For the first few minutes, they engaged in a tense game of cat and mouse through the artificial cityscape. Clyde used Rustbucket's bulkier frame to crash through barriers when necessary, creating shortcuts that the more elegant Titan couldn't navigate as easily. Just as Clyde was beginning to think he might actually hold his own, the interference returned. Warning lights flashed across his console as external commands began overriding his control. "It's happening again," he shouted into the comm. "Initiating manual override." Sasha's voice came back, tense with concentration. "Switching you to direct control now. Neural interface disengaging." The sudden disconnection from the enhanced system was jarring. Rustbucket felt sluggish and unresponsive under manual control, but at least Clyde was the one piloting it. Across the arena, the Titan was also behaving erratically, suggesting that Thalray was experiencing similar issues. Then, to everyone's horror, previously concealed weapons platforms emerged from within the simulated buildings. These weren't part of either mech. They were built into the arena itself, and they were powering up, targeting both champions. Security breach. Ottercall's voice boomed through the arena. Emergency protocols activated. Evacuate the viewing galleries immediately. They're using the station's own defense systems, Quinn realized. This is bigger than just the duel. They're trying to create an incident. Clyde opened the communication channel to Thalray again. "We need to work together. Target the weapons platforms." Whether through the translator or simple battlefield intuition, Thalray understood. The Titan turned its attention to the nearest platform, destroying it with a precision energy blast. Clyde followed suit, directing Rustbucket's limited firepower at another platform. Together, they began methodically eliminating the threats, moving in tandem through the simulated city. "I'm detecting a control node," Sasha reported suddenly. "Northeast quadrant of the arena, disguised as a water tower structure. That must be where the hack is being coordinated from." "Fail Ray," Clyde called out. "The water tower. That's the target." The Titan acknowledged with a quick gesture, and both mechs began fighting their way toward the structure. The remaining weapons platforms concentrated their fire, creating a gauntlet of energy beams and explosive projectiles. Rust Bucket took heavy damage as they approached the target. Multiple systems were failing, and Clyde could feel the mech's movements becoming increasingly labored. "I'm not going to make it," he realized aloud. "Fail Ray, I'll draw their fire. You take out the control node." Before the Zarkoan could respond, Clyde pushed Rust Bucket into the open, deliberately attracting the attention of the automated weapons. As expected, they turned their focus on him, leaving Fail Ray a clear path to the target. Energy beams ripped through Rust Bucket's remaining armor. Warning signals blared as critical systems failed one after another. Clyde gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the mech upright and moving, buying precious seconds. The Titan reached the water tower structure and, with a powerful strike, tore it open to reveal a complex device nestled within. With surgical precision, Fail Ray disabled it, sending cascading shutdowns throughout the compromised weapon systems. As the platforms went dark, the simulation flickered and stabilized. Clyde slumped in his seat, Rust Bucket barely functional around him. System failures cascaded across his control panel, but he had succeeded in his distraction. "Status report," Quinn demanded over the comm. "Still alive," Clyde managed, wincing as sparks showered from a ruptured conduit above his head. "Barely." The Titan approached Rust Bucket, moving with cautious respect rather than the predatory grace it had shown earlier. Fail Ray opened a visual communication channel, allowing Clyde to see the Zarkoan's face directly. "You risked yourself to ensure mission success," the alien said, the translator converting its melodic speech. "A warrior's choice." Before Clyde could respond, Ottercall's voice echoed through the arena. "Security teams have apprehended intruders in the station's central control hub. The saboteurs appear to be members of the Proxima Hegemony, a faction that stands to profit from conflict between our species." The simulation dissolved around them, leaving both mechs standing in the bare arena. Medical teams and engineers rushed forward to extract Clyde from Rust Bucket's damaged cockpit. As they helped him onto a stretcher, Clyde looked back at his mech. Rust Bucket was a wreck, armor plating torn away, joints sparking, hydraulic fluid pooling beneath it. Yet somehow it had survived. "You did good, old girl," he whispered. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical treatments and debriefings. The saboteurs, it turned out, were agents of a rival alien faction that had been monitoring both Earth and the Zarkoan for decades. They had engineered the entire situation, from poisoning Earth's top pilots to hijacking the arena's defense systems, all in an effort to trigger a war that would weaken both civilizations. Ambassador Chen looked as though she had aged years in a single day. "The diplomatic implications are complex," she told the Earth team. "But one thing is clear. Without Pilot Morgan's actions today, we might be facing interstellar war instead of merely political complications." Quinn stood nearby, arms crossed but expression softer than Clyde had ever seen it. "Not bad for the worst pilot in the system." "What happens now?" Clyde asked. "With the duel, I mean. The final trial was compromised," Chen explained. "Technically, no official outcome can be recorded." Fail Ray entered the room, accompanied by two Zarkoan guards. The alien champion moved with careful dignity, stopping before Clyde's medical bed. In Zarkoan tradition, Fail Ray said through the translator, "When warriors face a common enemy together, they become bond brothers. The duel is no longer relevant. You have proven your worth not through victory, but through honor." Ottercall joined them, its scales shifting to a deep blue that somehow conveyed solemnity. "The collective has conferred and reached a decision. Earth will be recognized as an equal civilization, worthy of alliance rather than subordination. Your champion has demonstrated qualities we value above mere combat prowess. Clyde blinked in surprise. But I didn't win. You survived, Ray corrected, against impossible odds with inferior technology. And you chose to protect others rather than seek personal glory. These are the traits of an advanced species. The formal ceremony that followed was brief by Zarkoan standards. Only 3 hours of ritualistic exchanges and symbolic gestures. Clyde stood with assistance from Quinn, his injuries making every movement painful but bearable. When it was over, Earth and the Zarkoan collective had established the framework for a peaceful alliance. The saboteurs were remanded to a neutral judicial authority for trial, and preparations began for both delegations to return to their respective worlds. As they prepared to board their transport back to Earth, Sasha approached Clyde with a small device in her hand. I salvaged this from Rustbucket's neural interface, she said, showing him what looked like an ancient circuit board with unusual modifications. It's the component that enhanced your connection. I've never seen anything like it. It's decades ahead of our current technology, yet it uses design principles from systems that went obsolete 30 years ago. What are you saying? Clyde asked. Sasha shrugged. I'm saying that maybe you weren't the worst pilot after all. Maybe you were just the only one compatible with this particular interface. Quinn joined them, overhearing the last part. Keep that quiet for now, he advised. Central Command is already working overtime to spin this whole disaster into a victory. Let's not complicate things. The journey back to Earth was considerably more relaxed than their outbound trip. Reports had already reached the home system, painting Clyde as an unlikely hero who had saved humanity from both defeat and potential war. They'll probably want to parade you around, Quinn warned. Press conferences, medal ceremonies, the works. Clyde groaned. Can't I just go back to Lambda 12? Quinn raised an eyebrow. After all this, you could have your pick of assignments. Why would you want to go back to that dump? Clyde thought about it for a moment. Because it's where I belong, he finally said. Not as a failure, but as someone who can maybe help other worse pilots find their way. 3 months later, Clyde found himself back on Lambda 12, not as a disgraced pilot, but as a training officer with an unusual specialization, identifying and developing unconventional talents that traditional programs might overlook. The station had received unexpected upgrades. Nothing fancy, but the equipment was newer, the facilities refurbished. And hanging in a place of honor in the main briefing room was a piece of Rustbucket's armor, mounted like a trophy. Sergeant Quinn remained in charge of general training, still barking orders and pushing recruits to their limits. But occasionally, Clyde would catch him looking at the Rustbucket Memorial with something that might almost be pride. Sasha had been promoted and reassigned to Central Command's Advanced Research Division, but she sent regular updates on her work adapting the neural interface technology they had discovered. We're calling it the Morgan Principle, she wrote in her latest message. The idea that sometimes the weakest link is actually the key to the whole system. As Clyde watched a new group of recruits file into the simulation chamber, each one deemed problematic or unpromising by standard metrics, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. Listen up, he told them, unconsciously echoing Quinn's gruff tone. Every one of you is here because you failed somewhere else. That doesn't make you worthless. It might just mean you haven't found your real strength yet. He activated the simulator, bringing up the familiar asteroid field scenario that he had failed so many times before. Today, we're going to do things differently, he continued. Forget the standard protocols. Show me what you can do when you stop trying to be like everyone else. As the first recruit stepped up to the simulator, Clyde caught Quinn watching from the doorway. The sergeant gave him a small nod of approval before turning away. Clyde smiled to himself. Earth's weakest warrior had found his strength after all, not in victory, but in understanding that true power sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. And somewhere across the stars, he knew Ray was telling a similar story to young Zarkoan. The tale of how the supposedly inferior human in the patchwork machine had taught them all what courage really meant.